When I was younger, I used to do everything for what I thought was love. I would have done the stupidest imaginable thing and sacrificed myself in any way, because I thought that was the way. How else could other people love me? That stopped that night. As usual, once again, I had sacrificed my own well-being and sanity just to do the bidding of this girl I later realized never really cared about me. She loved the attention I would give her, though, and she would do anything to keep it. That summer, she went away to spend time in the part of the country where she was born. Since I thought I had to be with her at all times to make her like me, she didn't have any kind of trouble convincing me to come down to her hometown to spend the day with her. So my plan was to leave home early, catch the train that would take 3 hours to get me to her, spend the day there and sleep over at her mum's house, who knew me and really liked me. What she never told me was the reason why she had gone down to spend the summer. At dusk, I was already awake, up, and packing my things. I took an Uber to the train station, bought my ticket for a stupid expensive price, and waited for about an hour for the train to show up. The trip was pretty uneventful. I had some texts I needed to write, and the train rides would always bring me inspiration, so I took the chance to do just that. I arrived just before lunchtime. My friend and her mum picked me up from the train station in her mum's car, and we chatted all the way home. Lunch was great, as always, and we spent the afternoon visiting some of her friends and having coffee with them. I was a bit of an introvert, so this was all a bit of a stretch for me, but anything for her affection, right? When we were getting closer to dinner time, I tried to get her attention. We needed to go. Her mum would be waiting for us and we'd probably have to walk the whole way, but she didn't want to listen, and as a result we got delayed. She had one of her friends take us home, but on the drive she started going more and more silent, and looking more and more nervous. I asked her once what was wrong, not wanting to call attention to it, but she dismissed it and told me I was being annoying, so I decided to avoid the subject. When we got to her building and her friend left, we just stood there for a bit. I wondered why, since her mum was a single mum, her dad had left and never returned, and life wasn't easy on them, so the building they lived in wasn't exactly something to admire. It was actually somewhat creepy at night, with half the lights dead and part of most corridors completely dark. That was nothing compared to the night I was about to have. As soon as we opened the door to her house, I knew something was not okay. The house was a complete mess, like someone had robbed it while we were gone. The furniture was moved around, the plates her mum had in stands were all smashed on the floor, the window to the balcony was shattered. I was worried now. There was a noise coming from the depths of the house, like someone moving stuff around, and for some reason, she didn't seem surprised. I asked her what was going on. She didn't reply, but she had a sad, resigned look on her face. I insisted and she walked further inside the house. I thought she was nuts going into the house when someone must be inside destroying it as we speak. When she finally stopped at her mum's bedroom door, she called out to her mum and asked her to stop. I followed her, and I don't know if I wish I hadn't. When I got to the doorframe, her mum was inside the room, but it's like it wasn't her. She had this crazy look about her. She looked like she didn't recognize her own daughter when she went close, and she was biting pieces of newspapers and printing paper in such a wild way that the corners of her mouth were bloody from hundreds of paper cuts. When I showed up, she went crazy. She started running my way, and I froze, not knowing what to do or what was going on. Just before this now completely crazy and possessed woman reached me, my friend closed the door on her and locked it, with a loud thud following right after, probably from her mum throwing herself against the door. I asked her what the hell was going on, and that's when she explained. The reason why she came to spend the summer was because her mum wasn't doing very well. The doctors couldn't understand what was going on with her apart from it being a mental illness, but every night for a while now her mum would lose her mind, start doing things like that, and seem like she had completely forgotten who she was, where she was, or how to behave around everyone else. She would hurt herself, and that night seemed like a mild one. At this, I lost it. I refused to stay the night, and I asked her to drive me to the train station so I could go home. It was still early enough to catch the train back. However, she refused. She said she was afraid to stay there alone, so I told her to come back with me. She refused that as well. And I asked her to call her friend back and ask him to give me a ride to the train station. Again, she refused, but I was not going to spend the night there. Eventually, I gave up on convincing her to get me some sort of ride, and the area was so secluded there was no Uber that could get me out of there. I decided to leave on foot. I didn't care how long it took me. I wasn't staying there one more second. I left in the middle of the night, backpack full and not caring how I would get where I needed to get to. I checked Google Maps and followed the trail it indicated. What I didn't know was that this was a trail following the train line itself. I walked for hours, not knowing if any train would come at any point and make me jump into the 2-meter tall bushes that lined the rails, while my brain tricked me constantly into seeing shadows and moving things in the middle of the bushes. I can't be sure how many times I started sprinting out of adrenaline being punched into my heart because of something I thought I saw. Out there, if anything happened, I would be done. There was no signal, no houses, no help in any way. It was just past 3 in the morning when I finally walked out of the lines and got to walk to the train station itself. I checked the train schedules, and my heart was lost to desperation. The last train of the night had just gone out and off to home, and the next one would depart at 8 in the morning. 5 hours waiting in the cold. There was no completely covered area or waiting room. I accepted my fate then, and decided to use the rows of 3 seats as my bed for the night, and my backpack as my pillow. And then I saw it. In the middle of the tall weeds, back on the side I had walked through for hours, my friend was waving at me. At first I sat up and squinted to make sure I was seeing it right. I had spent hours getting used to my brain playing tricks on me out of paranoia, so this had to be one more of those. And yet, she wouldn't disappear. The upper part of her torso sticking out of the bushes, her long blonde hair curling down her shoulders, and this huge, toothy smile splattered all over her face while she waved at me and signaled me to follow her. I thought maybe she was worried and had followed me to the train station. I know how stupid it sounds now, but I still took 2 steps in her direction while I asked her out loud what she was doing there. When I did, she seemed to move in an anxious way, like she was expecting me to come to her. But her grin, her inhuman wave, and her movement just seemed off. I shouted if she was okay. Her follow me movements just got more intense. And that's when I realized. Her eyes, her smile, her face, everything looked almost like it was made of plastic or like it was just a replica. At this, I took a step back, and that's when she screeched. I jumped backwards, surprised at this, trying to understand what was going on, what was wrong with her. She started running my way as I stood there, arms and legs open, torn between running in all the different directions. When she finally climbed onto the platform and I could see the rest of her body, the horror struck me. Her legs, up to her waist, and one of her arms were black with weird sickly patches, and she ran fast but not straight. She ran like one of her legs was broken and healed wrong. I started running. There was no one around, and there wouldn't be anyone for a while. The reception was shut, the car park was empty, and I was completely out of options. I ran into the bathroom, slammed the door behind me, and used the door from the cubicle in front of it as a stopper, while I ran to the middle of the bathroom, paralyzed in horror, a million thoughts invading my head and none clear enough for me to make a decision. Then this thing started banging on the bathroom door. I put my hand to my mouth to stop myself from breathing or starting to cry and backed up into a corner. There was no way out. Then the banging stopped. For half a minute there was peace and quiet. I picked my phone to check the time and the service, and then I heard her voice. My friend's voice, softly calling me from the other side of the door as I heard what must have been fingers sliding across the door, and she called to me and asked me why I was running away from her. It felt like I couldn't breathe anymore. I couldn't get my limbs to move with the fear. I couldn't call anyone out of fear that my voice would trigger this thing. "I know you're in there," she said from the other side of the door. "Why don't you come with me?" I was shivering all over when she punched the door and made me jump and almost piss myself. I finally snapped out of it and called the emergency services in a whisper. I explained where I was and that someone was trying to murder me. Between that and them showing up, it felt like eternity. I could hear her pacing back and forth, her hand on the door and her fingers hissing through the wood. Then I heard her cackle, so loud I thought my heart would burst and I would run out of breath. I heard her footsteps going further and further and dissipate. I couldn't believe that was over. The police showed up not too long after and had to convince me there was no one else outside with them before I opened the door. When I walked outside and they sat me down to ask me what was going on, I saw her again behind them, waving at me with that shiver-inducing grin on her face. When I pointed to where she was and everyone turned around to look, she dropped under the tall weeds, and that was the last time I saw her. It was the last time I spoke to her. She tried calling me and texted me asking what was going on, but I never wanted to respond, ever again. I never sacrificed my own well-being like that for anyone else. I don't know what that was, or what happened that night, but I'd rather stay alive. About a year ago, I was going back home from a date with my boyfriend. We didn't have a car yet, either him or me, so to get back home I needed to catch a train, and then a bus from the station, which would drop me off about 6-minute walk away from my house. Usually I'd be fine the whole way back home. My problem was the wait at the train station itself between my boyfriend leaving me and the train coming. The train station was usually quiet, which can be good or bad, depending on the way you see it. That night, it was definitely bad. As usual, my boyfriend left me at the station gates and I went inside, beeped my card through and headed to my platform. The wait would be about 15 minutes, so I wasn't in a rush. I put my earbuds on and made my way through the air passage that led to the platforms and kept my eyes on the tips of my feet, staying behind and then coming back into view. I was exhausted. As I was walking and turned the corner into the stairs opening, I spotted this guy standing in the corner, whispering to himself. I tried not to stop or stare at him and just kept walking, keeping my pace but paying close attention to him through the corner of my eye. He had this ripped apart blue shirt with dirt marks and red slashes all over it, and jeans that seemed like they had been dragged through the mud. He kept bouncing back and forth while he whispered. I took one of my earbuds off after I went past him, trying to keep as much distance as I could, but still couldn't understand what he was saying. When I got to the bottom of the stairs, I struggled, deciding between sitting right there on one of the chairs and keeping an eye on him but staying in his presence, or going farther and just sitting on the floor to stay away from all that. I ended up just walking all the way to the end of the station and getting comfortable on the floor. I checked my phone, 10 minutes to go. That's when I saw, at the other end of the platform, feet showing up, coming down the stairs. It was him. slowly bouncing down the stairs and starting to come my way. My heart started pounding even harder, thinking I would have to run, but where? Short of jumping onto the rails and crossing to the other side, risking death, there was nowhere else. The bathrooms were now between me and him, and even if I went inside, there would be nowhere to go from there. As my mind was racing, thinking of what I should do, I finally saw his face. It was this sad, shadowy, empty thing that showed nothing. I didn't know what to do or what to think. Did he even know I was there? At this, he turned into the bathrooms. I was confused at first, not knowing what he was doing or what was going on, but my heart wouldn't let me relax or breathe. The man disappeared into the bathroom entrance. I wanted to know what he was doing, but I was so paralyzed in fear that I could do nothing but stand and hold my shirt. I frantically texted my boyfriend at this point, but as I had guessed, he was probably still walking back home and wouldn't check his phone until he got there. Then the train arrived. I cannot describe my relief. As soon as I could, I moved over to the train's side and clicked the doors open, which they did immediately with a beeping sound I couldn't be happier to hear. When I walked inside, I went in the bathroom's direction to see if I could see anything with the train's car protection around me. I could see the way into the bathrooms, but both doors were closed and I couldn't see anyone outside. I texted my boyfriend again, telling him to text me or call me as soon as he could because I was really scared. And when I looked up, I got the scare of my life. He was standing on the other side of the window, right next to the train, looking inside straight into my eyes. I screamed and jumped backwards so hard that I hit my head on the upper bags compartment, and he just stood there until he started waving at me. His face would not change, his thin lips completely white, and his eyes are so open. I felt my phone vibrate, so I picked it up without getting my eyes off the man. I wanted to start screaming for help because I thought after this there was no way he wouldn't just go around and come into the train next to me. But there was no one else around. I looked down to try to grab my phone and call him. I clicked his message, clicked the little phone picture, and when I heard the ring and looked up, the man was gone. I looked around to see if he had gone to get to the train door, but there was no one there. There was no one anywhere. I almost couldn't speak, and even when I finally could, I couldn't make sense of anything. What did he want? Where did he go? I tried telling my boyfriend what happened, but he didn't really believe me. It pisses me off that there was no one around to see what I saw, but can I blame them for not believing what I told them? I don't think I would believe me either. All I can do is hope I never see that man or anything like that again. I used to live in this small town in Scotland, about an hour away from Glasgow that was just off the west shore of the country. Around there, the weather was usually terrible. Not only because it's Scotland, but also because when it got stormy, you wouldn't only get rain and thunder, but also splashes coming from the ocean, being carried by the wind straight into the land. This was a really small town, so most of the population was on the older side, and to get to work you would usually need to catch the train to Glasgow. On the positive side, almost everybody knew everybody else, so it felt like a really nice and quiet area. This is where my story starts. Usually, I would leave my house early in the morning, walk for about 10 minutes to the station, which would generally be empty at that time in the day, beat myself in, walk to my platform and wait for the train. I was pretty punctual, but I would always allow around 5 minutes of spare time just in case the train made it to the station early. If I was to lose it, it would be an hour of waiting and probably the boot from my job. From the train station I couldn't see much to the outside because of the way the platforms were built, but there was one house with a second floor sticking over the rest that I could still see. It was the front of the house, so it had two windows turning toward me with white curtains behind them covering the view to the inside, and almost every day this lady would be sitting by the window. She had shoulder-length white hair and would always wear a blanket around her shoulders. One of the days, since I always saw her and in this town everyone would always say hello, when she looked my way I waved at her. She let through a nice smile and waved back, and I instantly felt like I had just made a friend. For weeks, even months after that. Almost every day I would get to the station, she would be there, waving and smiling as soon as I looked for her at the window. Sometimes she would stay and keep smiling and wave goodbye once my train was coming. Other times she would have to go tend to her own life and would leave before my train arrived, but I got used to seeing her almost every day of every week, which is why, when she stopped showing up, I got worried. A whole week went by without a sign of her, then another one, and when it got to a month I couldn't take it anymore. One day I woke up early, got ready for work and made a decision. If she wasn't there that morning, on my way back home I would go knock at her door and see if she was doing okay, and so that's what I did. When I got to the train station I looked at the window and there was no one. I went to work and came back and still nothing. So I made my way to the house, looked for it with the only reference I had, which was the second floor and its distinct windows, and found it quite quickly. I approached the house, which looked clean and tidy and well kept, cleared my voice nervously, and knocked 3 times at the door, as firmly as I could bring myself to. I heard footsteps inside, and 3 seconds later this other lady appeared at the door, a confused, welcoming smile spreading across her face. "Can I help?" she asked, her tone showing she intended to be nice, but she had no idea what I was doing there. "Yes, sorry to disturb," I said, trying to be as polite as possible. Then I told her that I was wondering who the nice lady I always saw on the second floor was and if she was alright, because I hadn't seen her in so long. The look on her face made my heart stop. "What do you mean?" she asked, shaking her head to say she had no idea what I was talking about. I explained who the lady was, that I always saw her on the window and that she was always really nice. I was sure that was her house. I felt like she was practically a second grandma to me just from all the time I spent waving at her. That's when this lady said she was really sorry, but that she didn't know what I meant. That the only people who lived there were her husband, and her 2 children, who were 3 and 6. There was no old lady living there. I started stuttering. I felt so ashamed and didn't know what else to say, so I said thank you and left. On the way home, my head wouldn't stop spinning with so many questions, and I had this growing fear in my chest. What had I been seeing this entire time? I didn't sleep a wink that night, not knowing what to do or what to think about all that. I tried to distract myself, but I just couldn't get the whole situation out of my head until the next time I was at the station. I walked all the way to my platform, and when I looked up to the windows expecting to see nothing there she was again. She smiled when she noticed I saw her, and started waving at me as she usually would. As I stood there, deciding what to do, one of the station workers tapped my shoulder and asked me if I was okay. He said I was so pale that he thought I might faint. All it was fear creeping into me, sinking my heart to the pit of my stomach. I looked away from the worker and at the window again. She was gone. After that, I never saw that lady again. What you were listening to were 3 train station horror stories written by myself. I wanted to make a longer video, so if you enjoy the 1-hour ones, apologies. I can tell you that they are coming. Hopefully, I can help put you to sleep. For now, I hope you enjoyed this one. Don't forget to subscribe if this has left you with a fear of being alone in a train station at night. There are indeed things to be afraid of out there. For now, are you sure you locked all your doors?